Welcome to the Elvis Presley channel. Elvis made people feel things in their souls as well as in their pelvis. He truly is Elvis the pelvis. The man had a way of igniting sexual feelings in women with only a thrust of his hips. If he weren't doing that, he would growl, and when he wanted to lock the feelings of his female audience up and lock away the key, he would smile at them. Why the older generation felt disgusted by Elvis Presley. Make sure to watch the video until the end, and if you're new here, don't forget to join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Elvis Presley channel. Why did people like Elvis? Phew! This is quite the question. Not because it's unanswerable, but because you have to factor in the many different reasons. Little Richard called Elvis an integrator, and he also called him a blessing who opened the door for black music. For the minority blacks, this was something. Without Elvis, the sound they cherished would have been obscure for longer. For the African American singers, it was freedom at last, and Elvis, who cared little for what was acceptable at the time, he has given African American greats their due. He gave sincere thanks to Fats Domino, B.B. King, and Ivory Joe Hunter. In fact, some reports say that he didn't like to be called the King when these greats were around. Presley did what other artists were afraid to do. He went on to hire an African-American songwriter, Claude Demetrius. The superstar was only concerned about talent. He didn't care how the owner of said talent looked. As a young man, he rebelled against the norm and listened to these artists growing up. Sometimes he'd drive across towns to go to clubs he wasn't meant to go and listen. Music called him, and he would listen to any kind of music and not limit himself to the so-called acceptable white conservative music most people listened to. He went after every kind of music, especially the African-American sound, and let it soak his soul to the brim. He would belt out their tunes and let the world know he did. It's easier now to dismiss what Elvis did, but those times were one of America's darkest periods, and to those who didn't live it, the implications would be lost on them. Elvis was a man that stood in the middle of a divide linking two worlds together. The black artists didn't have certain liberties open to them, such as touring and airplay. So, by bringing their sounds to the limelight, people discovered that they needed a change from their current drab music. So can you see now why people loved Elvis? That can't be all. Giving credit can't be the only reason people loved Elvis. True, he had great love from the African American audience, but that's not all. So why did people love Elvis? Elvis sold a dream to people, a dream that looked attainable, and by doing so, he helped people feel they could get over whatever they were going through. Elvis grew up dirt poor. From his birth, his parents relied on support from friends and family. He lived in tenement houses and experienced most Americans' suffering during the Great Depression. When he could, he also began to work to help with the family finances. Elvis was the average American. Well, if you remove his killer looks, of course. He let people know this throughout his life. As a devoted Christian, he felt gratitude for what he had and remained humble. His growing fame didn't turn him into a diva, and he gave back to the community as well as he could. He related with fans, cracked jokes. The fans felt connected to him, and he preserved that connection as in each of his concerts he closes by singing If I Can Dream. The song was about gratitude, and it thanked his fans for helping him grow and reach great heights as a singer. That gratitude and humility worked with fans who appreciated him even more. Still, this is not the only thing contributing to his success and love among fans. The evolution of the media also helped reach heights of love among fans. Radios were large, unwieldy things that sat in the house. However, with the development of transistor radios, people could listen to songs on the go. DJs enjoying the development of transistor radios battled each other for supremacy and belted out the top 40 Billboard hits. So concerts were not the only source of listening to artists. The rise of transistor radios coincided with the release of Elvis's Heartbreak Hotel, and with DJs continuing to play that hit song, not one person could resist the allure of Presley's voice. There were television shows which competed for ratings, and if there was anyone that could bring the numbers, it was the superstar singer. Ed Sullivan and Steve Allen had a bit of competition on who could get numbers more. The two of them, at different times, used the superstar as their trump card and got what they wanted. Still, all of this may not have been possible without the efforts of the Colonel, the King's agent, who is a calculative businessman. The Colonel had impressive marketing ability and began using different positive means to market Elvis's identity. He helped create an image of Elvis that stuck in the fans' minds, mostly teens. Teens were the ones who were crazy about Elvis the most, creating a situation where religious leaders and parents hated him passionately. There was a time a parent wrote to the FBI branding Elvis a security threat. This was due to his show in La Crosse, where teens went ballistic when he showed up and performed. In fact, the letter contained detailed descriptions of how Elvis conducted himself on stage in a way that seemed like a sexual self-gratification on stage. The parent then expressed their fears children were susceptible to what Elvis was doing and cited that psychologists and psychiatrists claimed the younger ones were attracted to sexual indulgence and perversion by certain types of motions and hysteria. To their parents, Elvis was the demon's spawn, which is interesting considering Elvis won a Grammy for singing gospel songs. However, parents and the older people softened towards Elvis after he returned from his military service. The singer with the sideburns didn't cause problems during his military service. In fact, Elvis didn't sulk or complain, but did his duties diligently and tried to make the men in his unit feel more comfortable. He got them an extra kit and helped provide a TV for their bedroom. There were times when women tried to break into the base or crowded him when he was doing his assigned truck driving job. Other than that, he was a first-rate soldier who served well. He rose to the rank of a sergeant and was honourably discharged. Elvis was a hero to many people, and he had the gift of the gab, which put people at ease. Different factors combined contribute to how much people loved him. He had a star power not many musical talents possessed. He was truly an extraordinary person. Elvis performed in what a parent called the filthiest and most harmful production. Ladies were given a stern warning not to listen to his songs, and the church did sermons warning members of him. But despite all of this, people were drawn to him, especially women. The rules of the time were too much, and people felt restricted. They needed to breathe, and Elvis most sensationally provided that breath of fresh air. The man wore flashy outfits, sequined jackets, well-groomed hair, and sideburns that framed his face. This rebel wasn't scruffy. He was incredibly handsome, with a scowl that made knees wobbly. Honestly, not so many people can shy away from the sparkling dresses Elvis wore. A psychologist claimed that he had a powerful effect on women due to his primitiveness. The psychologist labelled the hip-thrusting and snake-like wiggling as primitive. Also, he called Elvis's clothing and appearance primitive. The psychiatrist believed without all of these, Elvis couldn't sexually charge anyone. Interestingly, some of these experts factor in the fact that the man changed the tune people favoured at the time and made the youths feel heard. Despite pushback from authorities, Elvis rebelled by defiantly upending social norms and becoming more and more the sweetheart of young women. That hip thrust and wiggling hips became synonymous with sexual freedom, and Presley did a lot of it even when authorities specifically ordered him not to do so. One event that particularly comes to mind was when Elvis went to Florida for a performance, and certain persons threatened to arrest him if he did so much as wiggle his fingers. Well, Elvis, with a scowl on his face, wiggled every part of his body that could be wiggled. He dated authorities and sang songs that were about defiance. He turned on his sexuality so much that women went hysterical with desire. They sought to touch him, to reach him, as if that would satisfy their bubbling desire. The screams of women were so much that the band couldn't hear what Elvis was singing, and they had to take their cue from how Presley's arse swung. As Scotty Moore famously said, we were the first band directed by an ass. The superstar's status as a rebel turned women on. The forbidden nature of expressing their adoration of Elvis was forbidden. As Tom Parker once said, Elvis was a taste of forbidden fruit. Elvis being forbidden deepened the great lust women had for him, cutting across all ages. Charles Greenberg reported how teens acted when the baby-faced king got on stage. He reported how a teenager screamed as if she'd suddenly been scalded. Another one made weird guttural whines. Again, a teen was scratching her arm with her fingernails, leaving long red welts. One ended up being able to grab Elvis's hand when he was performing. He flashed his killer grin at her and asked her to let him go politely. The teen reported the incident heavily and called the strong-jawed musician the dreamiest thing I ever laid my eyes on. This was the typical attitude that women had towards Elvis. He represented anything society was against, and society at that time had women repress their sexuality. It was taboo for a woman to communicate her desires, and it left a lot of women frustrated, and they wanted a release. With Elvis, teens and older women got that release. Norman Miller and James McGlinchey wrote an article, Girls Identify Elvis as Lover, in the September 28, 1956 New York Daily Mirror, consulting experts who analysed the behaviour of female fans and came to their conclusions. Older women, as a psychologist, theorised that they used Elvis as a form of a way to obtain a vicarious release of energy. The older woman wanted to escape the masculinity of the business world. They wanted to be women. They got this through Elvis, and the best part was they didn't need to be romantically involved with another man. So however they lost themselves to Elvis, they felt safe. They didn't need an affair so long as Elvis was there. On the other hand, specialists claimed hormones played a large part for teens, as at the cusps of womanhood they began to feel certain desires. The writers who consulted these specialists concluded sex was what the teens thought about when watching Presley perform. Their specialist, analysing the expression of teens when Elvis went on stage, revealed these young girls felt ecstasy, as if they'd given themselves to him. He supplied additional information that the girls, while maintaining control and shame with their boyfriends, could afford to do so with the brilliant singer, as there would be no shame or attachment afterward. The man claimed as much as those girls may want to send it. They felt primal towards the king of rock and roll. This appears to be true, as a woman who was a teen when Elvis performed in August 1957 at Spokane's Memorial Stadium revealed that seeing the legend perform felt like a sexual experience. The older woman revealed she, like many other girls, couldn't explain why they went berserk when they saw Presley. She had been to shows before, and never had she lost herself in that manner before, but when Elvis wiggled his hips and pranced with his legs, reasoning fled her, as it did other women. The interesting part was some ladies wrote and were critical of Norman Miller and James McGlinchey's article. They sarcastically remarked that all they felt was sex and mocked the writers for their articles. However, this denial may be flat, as it was obvious that Elvis did turn women on and help them satisfy their desires without having a relationship. The man had an unmatchable appeal and seemed to stand out if you compare the female reception of other popular artists. Rudy Vallee also had a great voice and was quite the looker by any standards, but he attracted older women who didn't always feel inclined toward him. They only wanted to mother him, although some of his older fans may also want to mother him and as well get their loins murdered by him. Frank Sinatra had a penchant for sensually charging everywhere he went, and even he didn't command such ecstasy from women as Elvis did. The man commanded the innate need for women to mother him and feed him so he'll grow bigger. His slight build inspired a woman's maternal instinct, and not too much the stirring of their loins, although he did stir the feminineness of the femme fatale Ava Gardner. Gardner once praised his heavy-duty phallus on screen in an interview. Well, Johnny Ray had the women going wild, but like the other talented men above, none had the type of hold Elvis had on women. Elvis's gyrating hips had magic with a secret only Presley himself knew and didn't share. True, Elvis had great star power and turned women on, but you can't dismiss Tom Parker. One of the appeals the legend had to women was that he didn't have a wife, at least in the early part of his career. This was what Tom Parker used to create a womanizer image for Elvis, which itself increased his legend in many women's eyes. Parker knew the type of image the adoring fans wanted, and he felt if Elvis were to be committed to a woman, it would reduce the craze the female audience had for him. so Parker's plan was to prevent Elvis from being in a relationship. In a way, Parker was a major factor in the legend of dating women. Having his love life be in control of another man wasn't exactly rosy, but Elvis mostly complied. At the time his fame was soaring and his name was on the lips of many in 1956, Elvis had a girlfriend, June Giannico, who revealed to the journalists that she was Elvis's one and only girl. It didn't sit well with Parker's script of Presley being the sly ladies' man, and Parker has his charge do something about it and fast. So in his next interview the star of stars downplayed June's statement next to June's dismay. The man said, "I got about 25 girls I date regular." Then he proceeded to tell the ladies they could be a part of his many women if they bought a ticket to his show. What a man! What a legend! Elvis was a sensational musician, but he was also so much more. His presence helped other obscure artists and allowed women to display their obscure feelings. He helped different people to find their voices and inspired a lot more. His cultural impact is still present today, and despite his identity as a ladies' man, he officially has one child. Elvis sold a dream to people. He represented everything society was against. Why was Elvis Presley's signature dance revolutionary? Watch this video.